Welcome to episode 5, Why Donor Stewardship is So Important in Your Online Ministry. So, welcome back to this episode of Stewarding Your Online Ministry. This episode is for pastors, evangelists, preachers, Christian content creators who have an online ministry and are asking for donations, offerings, aka financial gifts in their online ministry. So, if you found this episode, like I said, welcome. This episode, while it is number 5, it's actually a further on into the series, and this is on purpose. The first 4 episodes, feel free to go back to if you want to, give you a strong overview into what it looks like with running an online ministry from a marketing and donor relations perspective. So, predominantly a donor perspective, as in those people who generously sow into your ministry, who give to your ministry, who give offerings, financial gifts, donations. They're just different names for the same action. So, here we are. In this particular episode, you're going to learn about effective donor stewardship and why it's important. And you might be like, well, what does that mean, Amanda? Like, why is it important? The result from the outcome from effective donor stewardship is that you will see an increase in giving, in upgrades, in gifts, as in financial gifts. It will also build trust with your community, those that are watching, as well as those that are currently giving, so those that are donors. And it fosters long-term donor loyalty. So they're the essentially key benefits to you when it comes to growing your online ministry. But stewarding, remember stewardship, stewarding your time, talents, gifts, resources, stewarding your donors is a big part of your online ministry, whether you do that yourself or you have someone support you. As in a team member or volunteer, depending on how you run your online ministry, then it is a key function and foundation to running an online ministry, donor stewardship. So I encourage you to grab a pen and paper and jot these down. If you're more into typing in your notes in your phone or on your laptop, by all means. That way you can come back to the notes that you've taken and take action. And with these episodes going forward, I do have an action item for you at the end of each episode. So the first 4 was the overview of donor stewardship and donor relations in your online ministry. These episodes from 5 onwards for now are more specific and have an action item for you, so that when you step away from this video, from this podcast, you commit to taking an action that relates to the topic that we've talked about and discussed. So, yeah, I know you're going to find this episode really helpful and practical, and it will give you that awareness and understanding of why donor stewardship is important, how it benefits your ministry, but more importantly, how it actually benefits your donors, how it actually builds trust with them, how it actually builds a community. Because if you're running an online ministry and you're asking for financial gifts, it is a responsibility in terms of stewardship to steward your donors, to connect with them, to build relationships, and we'll go into that in more detail. And, all for the glory of God. So I'm your host, Amanda, and I've worked in donor relations, donor stewardship, and legacy for 9 years in nonprofits in Australia. I've led volunteers, I've led small teams, I've worked in the donor contact centre, taking over the phone donations as well as processing them online, through to, over the years, to coordinating planned giving legacy programs, which is a different topic altogether, as in different subset of donor relations. I've always enjoyed speaking with donors. I love it. That interaction, hearing from them from day one. I really sort of recognize, and then through mentoring and teaching, I recognize that they are the foundation, to the non-profit organisation, the donors, the people that generously give. And in your case, your online ministry, those who generously sow into your ministry, whether it's a one-time gift, ongoing gifts, monthly partners, monthly donors, they're sowing into your ministry because of the work that you're doing for the kingdom of God. So like I said, grab a pen and we'll get into it. So really the key to understanding donor stewardship in an online ministry is really understanding the importance of nurturing those donor relationships, so those relationships with people who are sowing into your ministry. And it goes beyond a simple thank you. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go straight to what donor stewardship is not first, so that you can clearly see where you might have some blind spots. And it's not uncommon. So for those online ministries that I've connected with and spoken with, and there's many that I haven't, but I've certainly reached out to, these are the things that I've noticed are missing. And you might be like, well, how do you know they're missing, Amanda? Like, how can you tell? Well, yes, from the information on their website, but also I have sewed into the many ministries because I've been prompted to sow into, but also from a fundraising perspective with non-profits, I've also donated to see what their processes are as well. So it was very evident to me, these trends that I was picking up. And like I said, it's not uncommon. So this is you. It's not you're doing something wrong. It's just that you're missing the point. Like there's a gap that just needs to be essentially so much filled, but a bridge brought together where you need to really start to focus on the people that are sowing into your ministry. And by that, we'll go into more detail. So what donor stewardship is not. So this is honest, this is to the point, this is bold, but it's to open your eyes and unblock your ears to like, hey, yeah, I've got some gaps here, and this is where I can start to make some adjustments, and I understand the reasoning for making those adjustments. So number one, ignoring your donors. And what I mean by that is you're not communicating. So there's no communication. A person makes a gift, a financial gift, they sow into your ministry, there's nothing. So there is the receipt, but there's nothing else. There's no communications after that. And those communications can be email, it can even be voice note in some instances and examples. It can be through your social media channels, it can be through your website. So I do see this a lot. And I say this with compassion and understanding because until I started learning about this, when I moved into donor relations, then is when I started to understand it. But this even happens with big online ministries. Not all, but with big online ministries, there's many that are missing this component where they don't realize it, but they're ignoring their donors. And this is with platforms where there's hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And people, making gifts into their ministries, for example, online. To be, honest with you, that those that give online, and we'll go into this, receive acknowledgement, but those that sow into through, the PayPal link or the payment platform are not. And I see this a lot, and I've experienced this as well. But I'm coming to you from a donor stewardship perspective. So if you're ignoring your donors, as in you're not sending any email, you're not considering voice noting some of them, depending possibly on gift size, you're not using social media channels to consistently thank your current donors, and you're not using your website to do that. If you're also, so that's number one. Number two, you're neglecting to respond to inquiries and questions from your donors. So donors are sending in emails, they might be sending a DM, but it could be email, it could be through your website, and there's no response. So if you're neglecting to respond to your inquiries, to the questions that people have, it's not donor stewardship. You're actually eroding trust very quickly with people that are sowing into your ministry. and it can lead to, I say donors pulling out, but those that might be on a monthly giving program where they're giving monthly, just go, hey, that's it, that's enough. Or even those that donate or give, offer, so into regularly, like, hey, like there's not even a thank you. So that's number 2, neglecting to respond to inquiries and questions from your donors. Those questions that your donors have are your responsibility to steward and respond to. What donor stewardship is not, number 3, only asking for a financial gift on your live streams. So if you're only just asking for the gift on your live streams and you're not communicating with your donors, you're not thanking them, so going back to number 1 and 2, that really highlights number 3, where you're only asking for a gift on your live streams, as in you're a content creator or you go live. So I do see this happen. Like I said, it's simply a blind spot, so worth considering addressing, having some systems in place. So donor stewardship is not, number 4, only acknowledging and thanking people who give when you're on your live stream. So when you speak about giving, when you speak about making an offering, some ministries say if you've been blessed by this, that's for another episode. I believe there's other ways that you can actually, I say market, but share a transformation rather than asking people, because that can be misleading and come across as you're asking for paid blessings as such. So if you're only thanking people on your live stream, as in people are generously giving in the live stream, you're going through the comments and you're like, hey, such and such, thank you. You give shout outs, like that's all good practice, but it's neglectful practice where you're not actually nurturing those that I say giving behind the scenes, those that are monthly donors, those that give one-off and or regularly through your other links. So can you see where that gap is? And I do see this a lot online, not all the time, but excuse me, it certainly does happen. So I want you to just review where you're at with your donor stewardship with these 4. So to recap, ignoring your donors without communicating with them via email, voice notes, social media channels, your website. Number 2, you're neglecting to respond to inquiries and questions from your donors. Number 3 and 4 sit underneath that. You're only asking for a financial gift on your live streams, and you're only thanking those who give when you're going live and they're sowing into your ministry. So that's what it's not. What it is, it's simply thanking your donors, it's nurturing your donors, it's communicating with your donors, it's communicating with your donors in their preferred mode. You might be like, hey, Amanda, I can't speak to everyone. Absolutely, I understand you can't, but people might prefer to receive email. So you send it via email, for example. So, and looking at how often people want to hear from you. But depending on the gift size, you may consider another mode of communication. You might do a voice note, or for those who give for the first time, you follow up with a voice note or a text message through if you have their social media handles. So this is what donor stewardship is. It's actually about building relationships. It's about stewarding the community that is sowing into your ministry. If that's the one thing you take away from these episodes, it's stewarding the people who are sowing into your ministry. It's taking the time to thank them, to nurture them through communication, to build relationships with them. It's recognizing that their gift, no matter what size, whether it's $2, $5, 10, 50, 100, 1,000, it's recognizing their gift, no matter what the size. Yes, for different gift sizes, you might look at different forms of, we call it donor recognition, and that's an episode for another day. But in essence, it's about recognizing your donors, whatever the gift size is. It doesn't matter what the gift size is. Each donor is to be thanked, is to be nurtured, is to be communicated with. Donor stewardship is reporting the impact of their gifts. So they're sowing in your ministry. So what's happening from your ministry? Share that. You would have that data. already available. We'll go into more detail, but it's local missions that you're supporting. It would be data that you already have through the text messages and direct messages and emails people send you when they share their testimony and thank you. That's about sharing the impact of gifts. If you're a content creator, like, it's the number of resources you've created, for example. That's one example. But report the impact of their giving and invite them to become more involved. There might be a time where you may, with some donors, consider asking for an upgrade in their giving, for example, usually a monthly donor, or it might be a major donor, someone who's giving, for example, $5,000, $10,000 sowing into your ministry. You look at having, one-to-one conversations with donors that are sowing into your ministry about that, if that's their preferred communication, if that's what they're open to as well. But providing that opportunity. When you steward your donors, when you thank them, when you nurture them, when you communicate with them, when you build relationships, when you recognize the gift size no matter what, when you report on the impact, builds trust, it increases giving, and it increases, referrals, word of mouth. People do share with one another of their experiences. Excuse me. So I encourage you to think about that. Excuse me. So that's what donor stewardship is. So what happens when you neglect donor stewardship in your online ministry? So this is a bit more into the nitty-gritty of what actually happens. Almost think of it like the consequences. So you might be like, oh, hey, Amanda, yeah, I'm understanding more now what what donor stewardship is and what it isn't. And I can see where I'm at in that, where I'm stewarding my donors, or maybe where I'm neglecting my donors, or maybe where I can improve on my relationships with donors. What is the flow-on effect when you don't steward them or steward them well, or when your donors don't feel appreciated? And it's just, like I said, it's these simple strategies around, thanking your donors. What happens, for example, number one, there's a cost of losing donors. So monthly partners, for example, might start to pull out. So if that's happened to you, and I've seen that happen with a really big online ministry where the person actually openly and vulnerably shared that on their channel, my question would be, and has been previously without actually hearing back from them previously, but my question is, for example, to that person, and or if that's you and you're like, oh yeah, monthly donors have been dropping off, like recognizing that actually costs. There are costs involved with losing donors. It will cost you more time for new donors, new people to sow into your kingdom. And it costs more for that than nurturing your current ones. If you're nurturing your current donors, you will find that the drop-off rate, the decline will lessen. So if you've noticed an influx, an increase of donors dropping out of your program, then this is where donor stewardship starts to come into place. And when you start nurturing those current ones, you're going to start to see the drop-off rate decrease. There always will be a drop-off rate, but it's about reducing it. It's through donor stewardship. So remembering that there's a cost involved with losing donors. It'll cost you time, it'll cost you energy, it'll cost you money to look at ways to acquire new donors and for people to sow into your ministry. You might be like, hey, Amanda, I'm not in a position to do paid ads or have on my website when people give. So you might see some of the big ministries who are online as well as offline. They have on the screen there, it'll have the name of a person and what country and when they donated and the amount they donated. I understand that you're not in a position, as all online ministries are not in a position to have that set up. And so you might be like, well, Amanda, I don't have it, paid ads. or a payment. I'm not in a position to have that kind of system set up. Where it'll impact you if you don't, and that's totally okay that you don't, it's going to mean, and I've seen this online with some online ministries, is that you end up on your live streams actually handling a lot more objections and asking about giving and sowing into your ministry gets really awkward. Uh, you can just discern that. And I've been able to discern that and then recognize and heard, through a public announcement that there'd been a drop off in monthly donors. And I was like, well, yes, when you invest more time into nurturing your donors, they won't drop off. And it makes it easier too when you are doing your ask on your live stream, when you have all the details up on the live stream for ways that people can give. It'll be much easier for you to ask about people sowing into your ministry because you're already nurturing your donors. You're already nurturing them behind the scenes with these strategies that we've talked about in these episodes. So when it comes to the ask online, it's a lot easier because you're already in the flow of it, in the balance of it. You're already stewarding your donors, so it doesn't feel awkward. It's not awkward, and there's not that massive gap. So yes, that was a big, big one on the cost of losing donors. So the power of loyalty. So donor loyalty is not to be underrated. So cultivating loyal donors is the key to long-term ministry sustainability. Those who sow into your ministry continuously, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, anything in between. When you nurture your donors, when you steward your donors, this brings about donor loyalty. And the benefits to you, if you're like, well, that's great, Amanda, but what does it mean for the ministry? What it means for your online ministry is that those donors are likely to increase their giving amount. So the gift size that they're giving, they're likely to attend events if you host them. They become ambassadors. So they're talking about your ministry beyond your channel. So conversations they have with people, they're sharing that. It's that, for example, word of mouth, but they become ambassadors. They speak well of, they speak highly of, they speak respectfully of your ministry. And they're happy to sow into it. There's no gaps there. They may offer to volunteer for your ministry. They may offer to volunteer and serve in your ministry, whether that's in an administration capacity or another form of capacity. So that's not to be overlooked as well. But this is what comes from donor loyalty. They'll participate in your fundraising activities. So if you're running campaigns, live campaigns, they'll participate, they'll be advocates, they'll be ambassadors for you, they'll spread the word when it comes to your ministry. And they'll provide you with valuable feedback. So not to underestimate donor feedback, that's going to be its own episode. But when you consider and take the time to stop and listen to what your donors are essentially telling you, but sharing with you, they're going to share with you what's working really well, and the gaps they see, and maybe some of the issues that they've had. That's great data. That's awesome information. That means you can refine what you do. And that all plays into stewardship. That's managing what you have. And then as you manage what you have, more will be given. So that's where it really ties in. So that's number 2, the power of loyalty. The importance of impacts, number 3. So your donors, people that are sowing into your ministry, are more likely to stay engaged when they sense a connection to the cause, to your ministry in particular, and they see the tangible impact of their financial contributions. So for example, you might be a deliverance ministry and they're connected to that because perhaps they've had a personal experience. Maybe they've had deliverance, or they've seen it, they've witnessed it, or they've been part of it. So they sow into your ministry, for example. When they can see the tangible impacts of their financial gifts in terms of, say, the number of events that you ran, the countries you've impacted, deliverances, number of deliverances, souls saved, for example, how you use your overheads, for example, just generally, where they can see the impact is actually going back to donor loyalty, is going to lead to increase in giving. It's going to lead to them becoming ambassadors, for them volunteering to help out, for them continuing to provide, thank yous and recognition and feedback for you. So that's the importance of impact, when you share the tangible impact of their giving to your ministry and the local missions that you've been able to support, for example, depending on what your online ministry supports and does. So number 4, when it comes to what happens when you neglect your donor stewardship and what to do about it. So donor stewardship builds a strong foundation. It's not just about asking for a gift. It's not asking for, hey, is this blessed you? Would you consider sowing into my ministry? It's not just, hey, you're sowing into good soil. They actually need to see the good soil. They need to get a sense of the good soil. They need to be able to, for those that are prophetic, they need to have gifts of discernment. They will discern the condition of the soil, because they'll be able to discern what is happening with your ministry, not in detail, but they'll have that. If a donor has a gift of discernment, they're going to be able to discern and pick up on that. So it's actually about building genuine relationships with them. So it's going beyond just thanking those that sow into your ministry in your live stream. It's thanking them outside of that as well, and those that are currently giving as well. So it's that dual impact and effect. And ways that you can show how their offerings, their gifts are being used. Like I said, there's many online ministries doing this really well. I'm focusing on, for example, if you found yourself here, your ministry, where you're like, oh yeah, this is all new to me, Amanda, and I just need to work out how to do it, and start with that. Or I've experienced a few of these things that you're talking about, as in things that I haven't done, and I need to look into that more. So examples, it could be number of lives saved, souls saved, what people share with you, because you'll get that through text messages, emails, DMs, Bibles distributed, for example, number of downloads if you're a content creator, number of resources released, countries impacted, share like the countries. For example, the local missions that you're supporting, and who are those missions, or give it generically, but actually show what you're able to do. So you might want to protect, for various reasons, confidentiality, the name of the actual group that you're supporting locally, but you can give a theme of what that is. So it might be single mothers, for example. It might be widows, but if you can keep it generic, but your mission, your ministry is supporting those missions, for example. This builds trust with your donors. This leads to increased giving. This leads to donor loyalty, them being ambassadors, them continuing to give and staying with you for years because you're doing this. So the consequences of poor donor retention. So what is poor donor retention? It's where donors, I say, drop off when they've decided not to give anymore. They stop giving, or you've seen a massive decline in the giving, excuse me, in terms of, I say, income coming through. If you've seen a decline, like it's been growing and then it just plummets, that you need to look at what's going on behind the scenes there in terms of your ministry, your processes, your systems, where they're at, what needs adjusting, and that's where these episodes will help you in specific areas there. So poor donor retention is when donors essentially drop off for various reasons. Now, we shared in the beginning of this episode, there's that constant pressure for you then to be speaking on your live streams about giving and asking people to sow into your ministry. There's this real pressure on you then to do it because people have dropped off. It actually has a negative impact. So, for example, it can impact your reputation with regards to how you look after your donors when it comes to keeping in touch with them and communicating with them. So consider that. Do consider that. Like, it does have an impact on your reputation. It can lead to negative reviews or discouraging reviews that people leave in different forums or even on your comments because you're not stewarding your donors. It also is word of mouth as well. So take that into consideration. And like I said, it's difficult to re-engage lost donors. So those that have dropped off, have left, unless they've been really specific and clear with you and said, hey, this is why I have. And if it's feedback you have an action, then, that's on you. That's your responsibility as stewarding your online ministry and your donors to look at the feedback they've given you and to take it on. It's easy to say, oh, look, I get slammed in the comments and these themes come up. Well, what are those themes? What can you do? It doesn't necessarily mean that you respond to every comment, but what can you do from those themes? And then start to share that with your community. But it's difficult to re-engage lost donors, those that have tapped out, stop giving. And then it costs time, energy, and focus when it comes to encouraging people to sow into your ministry. But when you're sharing the impact of what your ministry is doing, so going back to these other ones, when you're sharing the impact of their giving, you're sharing outcomes, so specifics around number of lives saved, all of those specifics, for example, and one specific to your ministry, things turn around and you won't have the negative reviews, potential slander, negative comments. You won't, that'll fall away, and you won't feel like you're always addressing objections because you're stewarding your donors, those that are sowing into your ministry. They may still connect with what your ministry is doing, but if they're sensing that they're being ignored, and that you might think, well, Amanda, that sounds so selfish. But people are sowing into your ministry. They would like to hear what's happening in terms of, the gift. And it's your responsibility in terms of stewarding your donors to start to share that with them. There'll be donors that are just like happy to sow into and just like, yeah. But remembering people give for different reasons and are motivated to give for different reasons. So that's where all this comes into place. So from all of that, you do need to consider revamping your approach. So we've looked at the cost of losing donors, number one, the power of loyalty, number two, the importance of impact, number three, building a strong foundation, number four, and five, the consequences of poor donor retention. So with all that in place, this ties into what we were speaking with regards to the themes that you're seeing, the feedback that you're getting. Use that to revamp your approach. Like if you're listening to this, into the new year of 2025, this will set you up for the year ahead. If you're listening to this into the future, this will shift things for you over the next 90 days, over the next 6 months by implementing and focusing on building stronger relationships through consistent communication, through regular emails, personalized experiences for some donors, and demonstrating the impact of their financial support into your ministry. What work, what blessings, what work has been accomplished through them sowing into your ministry. So we've covered quite a lot in this episode. It comes with an action item. So after listening or watching this episode, I want you to consider an action item, and your homework is to evaluate your current donor stewardship practices. So what we've talked about, go through your ministry, like your data and the details that you have, and look at what you're doing. What's working well, what isn't, and what are the gaps from today's episode. So take into consideration, are you effectively communicating the impact of your ministry with them, with your donors? Are you showing appreciation for your donors in meaningful ways, not just a slapdash, and not just for those that are, giving on the live stream? Are you showing appreciation for all your donors in meaningful ways? So that's your homework for this episode. And yeah, subscribe to this channel for more practical tips for stewarding your online ministry. And look forward to seeing you in the next episode.